Welcome to the Crypto Layer HQ. Today we will be covering the altcoin market and going over major altcoins of this cycle, as well as what we expect to happen in the coming months and into the end of the year. So first, if we look at Solana, which was one of the major altcoins this cycle that had a major run from the bottom to the high, it ran about 3,600%. So we had a massive run with Solana, and a lot of attention was on Solana with different projects and meme coins also launching on it. We can see now it's broken down from a critical level, and we did spend a lot of time in the between 120 to $200 range, and this we can essentially consider a distribution zone. So now what I think is going to happen is a lot of people are stuck long and probably bought in this distribution zone since we traded around it for almost 2 full years. And now lots of people are probably in positions they want to get out of and looking for an exit. So what I think will happen is when we do get bounces, we will most likely get rejected. And if we do end up getting a bounce up to 110 to 120, I think it will get aggressively rejected because a lot of people who entered are going to see this as their final chance to exit and will finally capitulate and just want to be done with altcoins and maybe just crypto across the board. So that'll probably result in a major downturn and just more of what we've already had over the last few months. I do think Solana is going to face a lot of headwinds since it did spend such a long time in this distribution zone. A lot of volume and a lot of holders will be in this price range. So a lot of them will need to capitulate and get out, which will potentially result in Solana maybe even revisiting its lows in the teens and 20s. I also think that in the future, if we do end up getting an alt season and Solana is part of that alt season and we do see a major rally, I do think this resistance zone will be a very critical point. And even if we do rally in the future, and let's say 2028, 2029, I do think this will be the first major resistance since a lot of people who are holding from back in 2024 and 2025 will finally just want to exit their position at break even. So even as we do end up going higher, there's going to be a lot of supply and a lot of people wanting to get out of their positions. So I do think Solana is going to face a lot of difficulties once it reaches this zone in the future, if it ever does. The next altcoin I want to look at is XRP. We can see XRP's done something similar. It also had a major run. We can see from the bottom to the high, it ran 845%. And we can also see that it created a very critical support level that it's now also broken down from. And I do think some similar to what's happening with Solana is that if we do end up getting a bounce to this level, it will get heavily rejected and we will continue lower since we spent so much time in this zone between $1.80 and let's say $3. So since we spent so much time here, and it's also, we can see a distribution pattern. So lots of people would have ended up buying and going long here and having averages in the $2 to $3 range. And a lot of these people, once they see bounces, they're going to use it as an opportunity to get out, which is why we'll probably continue lower. And same thing as Solana is in the future, that if XRP is part of an alt season and we do start to rally again in the future, let's say in 2028, 2029, I do think this will again be a critical level where a lot of people will just get tired of holding XRP since for 3-4 years by then, and will just want to get out of their position and will end up exiting. And this is also a big reason why when we do get alt seasons, oftentimes new altcoins are the coins that end up performing better since they don't have all this overhead supply and bag holders that would just want to get out of their positions. If we also look at total 3, which excluding BTC and stables, so this is essentially the altcoin market cap priced in Bitcoin, we can see it's at a critical level, and we can see this is a support zone that has held now many times. We've bounced off it back in August and again in November and again in December. So you can see every time we reached it, we bounced there, and here. So we can see we're now testing it again. And oftentimes when we get bounces off these levels, we can also see each bounce is weaker and weaker, that eventually we will just break down. And I do think most likely we will end up getting some sort of move lower and potentially some sort of capitulation if we don't manage to hold here. And this could be coupled with it could be coupled with Bitcoin even rallying a bit, or maybe getting a further dump to 60K. It's hard to know exactly what Bitcoin's going to do in the short term, but definitely if the overall markets continue to be weak and Bitcoin continues to be weak, people will eventually throw in the towel for their altcoins, and we will see this major level break. And I do think once this major level breaks, similar to what's happening with Solana and XRP, it will end up playing as a major level in the future, that once we eventually potentially consolidate lower, once we will want to break above, this will definitely act as a resistance point until it's able to break and potentially have an alt season in the future. So those are the things to watch out for. I do think these are the main levels to watch out for with Solana and XRP, as they're very obvious critical support levels and now turned into resistance levels. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out over the next 6 months with these coins, because there is a lot of overhanging supply in these zones, which a lot of bag holders are eventually going to give up on and start to sell. So it will be interesting to see how low we end up going in with XRP and even Solana. Something else to keep in mind is for these coins to end up having a chance to recover in the future, the lower they go and the longer they consolidate low gives them a higher chance to recover in the future. And that's because, let's say we go below $20, a lot of people will end up capitulating, and more of these people will just end up giving up and selling, as opposed to if we hold in this region, there'll still be a lot of hope, and every time we go back here, someone sells, and then we eventually go back to it and more people sell. But if we end up going very low and just, let's say we consolidate in the teens and even potentially go below $10, and we just consolidate here for many years, let's say 2-3 years, a lot of people will just end up giving up and selling and not caring about their positions anymore. And once that happens, then you have a lot less supply above, which eventually lets us rally again in the future. But if we do end up holding at higher prices at, let's say, $50, and we just end up chopping in this region, I would say that it does make it harder for it to perform well in the future. So those are the things to keep in mind in the bear market, and see how these things play out.